Good morning. I almost tripped because I'm probably the only person here who doesn't have a high school diploma. And what am I doing here talking to you all? I shared that story with, when we're asked to talk to people we didn't know, that I always feel a little unhinged because I'm not as educated as some of you. That diploma is very important. So thank you, Carney Sandoe, for titling this session Included and Empowered. This title represents the hope of every parent who sends her or his child to school or to the playground or even to the workplace, to be empowered and included. There are many chapters in the book of inclusion. And it is our collective responsibility and duty to refresh stale chapters, and in some cases, author new ones. But always remember that we're writing a book of inclusion. This is not only on climate change, but also on changing the climate in our respective institutions. Not only should our schools, curricula, and leadership reflect the beauty of diversity in the 21st century, they should go even further to be more inclusive and empowering of all groups. With diversity as a precursor or a chapter, inclusion becomes the goal of the book. The need to be proactive and productive by being more inclusive will counteract and defeat the culture of fear and defeat that grips our country, and in so doing, marginalizes whole communities. I would like to acknowledge Vuyelwa, my spouse of 31 years and fellow freedom fighter, who almost didn't come because she said, "Why should I go and listen to you speak?" With her, for all those 31 years, we used the spear of education to fight ignorance in both our native and adopted homelands. And present here is John Connor, a brilliant educator and dean of faculty, whose pastoral skills when it comes to dealing with faculty and children are legendary. My communications director, Gail Friedman, who makes me look better than I actually am. It's funny. But I also want to take this moment to acknowledge and recognize Barbara Chase, forever my mentor in chief for so many, and legendary developer of leaders, if ever there was one. I am an example of your work, and it is an honor to say so. I also thank Deborah for reaching out and convincing me to come and be with you. Colleagues here, so many, like Bobby Edwards, Ken Aldridge, Vida. I also saw Susan here somewhere. Colleagues with whom we waged numerous battles in our version of making all kids, particularly black boys, walk tall and unbowed, using a no excuses approach when it comes to high expectations and achievement. I also have a former chemistry student here, Courtney Bado, and I also saw Ashley somewhere. I saw you, Ash. And so many other people I've come across, and my sister from Soweto is here as well. It's just wonderful to be in front of all of you. Without all of your support and your ears right now, I won't be who I am. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the personal And on top of the personal, I'm going to start with the person who gave me life. My sheer presence here to address esteemed and aspiring educators is vindication for my mother, who instilled in all her 6 children the importance of using education to restore one's dignity. In 1850, her great-grandmother, Jacob Bokwe, was the first black person in Africa to take a white person to court for publicly calling him a gross liar. He demanded an apology and compensation, even though he lost the case in the white court. He had made a point for future generations to always stand up and strive to advocate for one's dignity and empowerment. My mother, like her father and her great-grandfather, was deprived of pension because of a law that prohibited black women from earning black pension. By then, 4 of her 5 boys who grew up in that environment of apartheid had the then dubious distinction of either being arrested or exiled because they dared to fight against injustice as teenagers. Some of our people, our neighbors, who were apathetic and maybe a little scared of the authorities, would often say to my mother, "Hey, abantwana bakho abaqeqeshekanga," which literally means you failed to properly raise your children as they are in and out of trouble with authorities. Mother would respond, "How dare you say that about my boys when they're advocating for your dignity?" So imagine this, the arrest and exile of her children started in 1976 with me. I was a senior in her class, which is why I don't have a high school diploma. Chalk in hand in her biology class at 8 o'clock, mother witnessed me being led away in handcuffs, and I looking back saying, "Goodbye, Mama." The hated apartheid secret police led me away, and I missed out on that lesson on the nervous system. She continued to teach defiantly and tried to finish the lesson, not knowing where I was. Neither she nor I knew if we would ever see each other again. And as I said, that happened to be the last class I ever took in South Africa. 20 years earlier, in 1956, during the infamous treason trial, my mother had witnessed the arrest of her father, along with Nelson Mandela. So this family cake for protest was baked from 1850 until 1990, and it never became stale, which is why I was saying earlier, let us make sure that these chapters, we keep writing them, refreshing them, and not giving up on writing them. So my bride of 31 years and I came to America in 1986 and were armed with education. So I'm going to take you even back now to this country and how this country taught us and how we taught each other. In 1956, Martin Luther King asked some leaders in the US and South Africa to contribute an article to a magazine called The Liberator. Now, what follows is a sentence. I've just taken a sentence from some of the people who wrote this article. Eleanor Roosevelt: "I think December 5th is an important date for all of us in the US to remember. The bus boycott has been one of the most remarkable achievements of people fighting for their rights, an achievement by Americans which has rarely ever before seen. Roy Wilkins, long known as the first capital of the late Confederacy, the city of Montgomery, Alabama, now has a new and more righteous claim to fame. Once the war capital of an alliance dedicated to human slavery, it is now the peace capital of a new liberation movement. Ralph Bunche. For the past year, Martin Luther King and his fellow citizens of Montgomery have been doing heroic work in the vineyards of democracy. They have steadfastly refused to butter away their dignity. May God help them for that. A. Philip Randolph. This Montgomery movement for human rights has introduced in the complex of social change in human relationships in the South a new quality of action. Z.K. Matthews, that's my mother's father. All the world over, lovers of freedom have been thrilled by the magnificent way in which the people of Montgomery have stood up and fought for the elementary rights. Their example is an inspiration to others faced with similar problems in other parts of the world. So on the very day of this publication, Liberation, 5th December 1956, my aforementioned grandfather, along with 155 others, were rounded up and arrested for high treason. My grandmother, trust grandmothers, hid the notes of this correspondence with Martin Luther King under the blanket of the crib where my 2-month-old brother was sleeping, and warned the police that if anyone touches her grandson, she has hot water. She knows how to use it. Thus, my courageous mother witnessed the arrest of her father in her home in 1956, and 20 years later, the arrest of her son, and almost 20 years later, the release of Nelson Mandela. This was vindication for that early story in 1850 for her great-great-grandfather who had fought for his dignity. Now, on my father's side, at 19 years old in 1877, no one thought a chemist could actually relate so much history, right? My great-grandfather was shot fighting the British colonialists in an earlier war called Ngaichibi, which literally means the grass turned into pools of blood. When my dear spouse found out about this, when we visited his grave, she used her authority as the most senior daughter-in-law to tell all other daughters-in-law that the next child to be born in this family shall be called Zeni, after that man who fought against the British. That child, Zeni, is now a 10th grader at Groton School. No one in my family says no to Vuyelwa. So, back to this conference, this wonderful conference. This conference is a call for us to awaken to the demands of our time. I often stress that education can be described as service. And service is the most authentic form of leadership. And also, I believe, as I've said earlier, that diversity and empowerment are chapters in the book of inclusion. So, the first thing I'm asking you to do is to be impatient for inclusion. Do we have the courage to be impatient for inclusion? Should we not respond to scathing attacks from jurists, one of whom has the gall to espouse the vacuous notion of the inferiority of black college-bound students as part of his strategy against affirmative action? Do we remain silent at such inane and brainless articulation from someone who is partly responsible for safeguarding our Constitution, which, as the President recently reminded us, starts with the three important words, with the people. Revita, I'm indignant. Such ignorance should be treated with the contempt it deserves. Throughout history, educators have not kept mum when there are disparaging attacks against entire groups of people. Our profession has to be impatient for inclusion. Some politicians running for president are also as divisive and dangerous when it comes to women, Muslims, political refugees, and Latinos. This is a form of neo-apartheid, and it should be called out. 60 years after Montgomery, we should awaken to our responsibilities and not allow people to hide behind free political expression when such hateful rhetoric psychologically harms children, brings up scars of exclusion of people who are deserving of their dignity as much as anyone else. Who is going to stand up for children if educators are not impatient for inclusion? The next piece is access and affordability. Many schools strive to be need blind, and very few succeed. The opportunity of access and the challenge of affordability must be faced squarely, and we should not be blind to the needs of others. Addressing access and affordability is a chapter, yet another chapter we should be authoring together. While most schools like having diversity, the tough work of ensuring that every single child in the school feels not just invited or welcome, but included and belonging is the work that we often say is just too hard for me to do. And the question I ask our heads and our practitioners and our educators, a question that was asked by Deborah earlier, is who is not at your school today? Who will not be at your school tomorrow if you do not address these issues? At Groton, we engaged this question with the trustees. In doing so, we realized and were shocked that in 1983, tuition was equivalent to 38% of the average household income. And in 2013, that number had become 76%. Something drastic and productive had to be done to address this issue. With support from trustees, alums, including someone who recently introduced me in a way that made me feel and walk tall. This man said in San Francisco, "I'm introducing a black man." He said with pride. He is white. He said, "I'm a short-elbowed Jewish man introducing a black man who is now the leader of a school where I felt excluded." Finally, my school has come to join the 21st century, and I'm proud of that. So after 1 year of the freeze, Groton School, which was number one forever in terms of being the tuition leader, is now number 14. And some heads are saying, "Temba, aren't you going to stop now?" And my answer is, we just got started. Because it's unacceptable that families we focus on do not include those who are in the middle. Most of our schools do very well with folks who have means, and we do a pretty good job bringing in folks who need financial aid. But that family that has just made $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and they're waiting and saving money for their kids to go to college, will not consider our independent schools unless something drastic is done. So this brings me to my third point. This is a story from zip code 10453. Anyone here from 10453? Anyone who knows where about that is? Yes, that's the Bronx, South Bronx. And my story from zip code 10453 is beyond access and affordability that I talked about to success and empowerment. When our students are 15 years old or younger, we're so quick to saying, oh, this child cannot do this work. It's the achievement gap. When actually it is the preparation gap. We can do more in our classrooms to close that preparation gap. We can do more to stop the paucity of girls in STEM education. We can do more in making sure we shift the incarceration of black males and have them actually graduate with degrees by acknowledging that we have a preparation gap, an opportunity gap. It's not just an achievement gap. So my hope is that when we leave this conference, we'll acknowledge the fact that we're very quick to rush and say, it's too late. It's the achievement gap. It started a long time ago. It's never too late. And our people have shown that you never give up on a child. Not at 15, not at 16, maybe not even at my 58. I'm a child, maybe you'll give me a diploma, high school diploma, that's all I'm asking for. So a boy from zip code 10453 in the South Bronx was empowered at Groton, raised by a single mother who works a modest job in Manhattan. This young man aspires to be a medical doctor. He learns that the way to medicine goes via organic chemistry. He registers for the course. A student, I won't say where they come from, quips and says, that course will take you to the cleaners. Little does he know that this young man's mother has been cleaning homes in Manhattan all her life. So the young man is undeterred and says, cleaners don't faze me. He writes the best exam and earns the highest grade in the class from students from all over the world. This is the first time, yes, Ashley, yes, Courtney, yes, everyone who's been at Andover, this is the first time in 3 decades of teaching organic chemistry that a black boy, yes, Villa, yours included and mine included, a black boy tops everybody in that organic chemistry exam. He earns the respect of the whole class, of the whole school, and typically in our schools, the headmaster invites guests to be his guests at graduation, and there's usually a suggestion as to who you should invite. When they came to me, I said, I don't need a suggestion, I know who I'm inviting. Zip code 10453, sitting right there as my guest. So this young man is now walking the halls and working in the labs of Brown University. I wonder, after the comments from Supreme Court Justice Scalia, what students think when they see him walking those hallways. Do they think he belongs, or he's just there because of a failed affirmative action? I'm sure every one of you here has a similar story of empowerment. This is the story of zip code 10453. Where we first had our own apartment when we came to this country, when we were on food stamps and welfare. After we graduated from our homeless shelter, and we loved that South Bronx apartment. And here I stand in front of you because you have broad enough shoulders to enable me in this country of yours, which is now mine as well, to be the headmaster of Groton School and to address you from Jacob to Matthews to Mandela to everyone in my country. If I were to tell them this story as I'm heading to South Africa next week, they won't believe it. that you gave them this honor. If you forget all I've said, please don't be impatient for anything else other than inclusion. Include everyone you see around you. I thank you.